Albie Sachs, thank you very much for doing this interview. Let me just begin by asking you how you came to know the Institute of Commonwealth Studies back in the 1960s.
Through melodrama. I was blown up in Mozambique. I lost my arm. I woke up in hospital. I'm transferred to London. I recuperate. I come out. I've survived. I'm feeling fantastic. I've survived. I swear they tried to kill me and they failed. I'm feeling quite marvelous. I don't know what I'm going to do.
This is 1988.
1988. And Shula Marx, whom I'd known for a number of years, a marvelous South African historian, a lovely person, nice and warm. She comes to see me. I'm just out of hospital. I'm very, very fragile physically, but feeling fantastic, almost like Superman, morally and emotionally. And she said, "Albie, what are you planning to do now?" And I said, "Well, I've been offered a fellowship for 3 months at Warwick, and somewhere in Australia they want me to come. What would you like to do?" she said. I said, "I'd love to start working on preparing for a new constitution for South Africa." Great. We've got a bathroom upstairs in the Institute of Commonwealth Studies building.
Where she was the director.
Where she was the director. And she said, "We can convert it into an office, and I'm sure that Swedish International Development Agency and Ford Foundation will pay for your the work that you're doing there." Now that's like a fantastic kind of gift. And I said, "Fine," and 3 months later, I was sitting in that office. So it's easy.
So this was just around the corner here on Russell Square?
Yes, yes. Russell Square has a very strong sentimental meaning for me in the best sense of the word, because I did my PhD at Sussex University. Most of my research was Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and it would have been, was it the Royal Commonwealth Society Library, not too far away. So I did most of my library work in Russell Square, and then the ICS was just a few doors down. So it's very much like home ground for me, and you get to know where you can get coffee and when it's crowded and what time to catch the tube, and there's little things that make London more livable are related to that. But my memory is much more than just convenience. I met terrific people there. From all over the Commonwealth.
Anyone you particularly remember?
Well, I remember a certain Chandrika from Sri Lanka. Her parents at Bandaranaike had been assassinated. She was a striking, very attractive personality and a strong presence and something almost poetic about her style and her manner. And she's in exile. And I'm in exile, and there's an equality between exiles. Later on, I met the exiled king of Mashweshwe of Lesotho, not through the ICS. We were all in exile together, and we had some good conversations. I remember meeting somebody who was doing her PhD on women writers in the Caribbean. Now today you'd say, okay, so what? That was quite remarkable then. And she came up with this phrase, the other's other. Very, very sharp conceptualization that turns everything upside down. It's not just a little bit more information, interesting information about somebody. It's just seeing the world in a different way. And I expected occasions like that. People would speak about their particular enterprises, and it could be in literature, it could be in politics, it could be in law, it could be whatever. Sometimes it was even more fun to attend something that wasn't your area.
Of course.
And then it gave me also space to speak about a new constitution for South Africa.
So there you are in effectively a converted bathroom on Russell Square. What resources did you use to begin to think about the way South African constitution should be developed?
I'm sitting down calmly remembering now. But I remember basically sitting down calmly and thinking, it's not new materials that we need. We've lived through the turmoil in this country. We've resisted apartheid. We know what we don't want. I was at the Congress of the People where the Freedom Charter was adopted. So we knew roughly what we wanted in terms of the vision and the values, but we didn't think then about the structures and systems of government and what do we mean by non-racialism and what impact does it have on a future constitution, and do we have regions and federalism and united country, and what kind of voting system do we want? None of those had been our concerns when the Freedom Charter was adopted. So the core set of values was very clear, and we were totally against what the South African regime at the time was proposing, which was group rights, that the whites would be represented by whites, it would be declared, the Zulu speakers by Buthelezi, and then there could be the other, the rest of the other. 3 presidents, sharing power, and a lot of the world liked that idea, sharing power, black and white sharing. It would have been a disaster, a catastrophe for South Africa. We would have entrenched racism, and it would have meant the Constitution would give the whites a minority veto to block advancement of the blacks. So instead of the Constitution being the gate-opening instrument that says, this is the way we're going to walk to freedom, these are the rules that are going to apply for a better life, the Constitution would have been there basically to protect the whites. And the whites happened to have 87% of the property and controlled the economy and the land and everything. So it was really to counter that kind of thinking. And I wrote a whole series of position papers, think papers. And the big advantage I had was I'm not doing so as an official of the ANC. If you do that, then it has to go to the committees, and the president has to agree, and somebody else, and somebody doesn't like this word and that word. As far as they were concerned, Professor Albie Sachs is going ahead, and if there's something he says, we can repudiate it if necessary. It gave me freedom.
And did you discuss elements of these papers with Shula Marx and with other people here at the Institute?
Not really. I gave her copies, and but it didn't emerge from workshops. It didn't emerge from these kind of debates.
So who did you bounce ideas off?
Myself.
Totally alone?
Totally alone. I would meet people who had come from South Africa. I met Peter Tatchell, very strong on gay liberation, wanting to know what the hell is the position of the ANC on gay rights. And I remember meeting Professor Marinus Vickers from the University of South Africa, the University of Pretoria. Very curious, very surprised to see that I'm so friendly and I'm welcoming in, and I'm not challenging him and calling him in polite English language lots of rude things. And I loved it. I loved that kind of interchange. But the real thing was converting intense life experience in South Africa, in exile, 11 years in Mozambique, living through the Mozambican revolution, going up with it, coming down with it. All of these things helped to shape my thinking. And then I would come up with what I saw as like position papers. It could be on religion, big issue. People are worried. Will the ANC now abolish religion in South Africa? Which is totally absurd. Oliver Tambo was about to be ordained as an Anglican minister on the future of whites in South Africa. Whites living as equals in society, protected by a Bill of Rights, not protected by a white minority veto. What are the other issues? Judges and gender. I put so much into that one. The women inside the ANC had battled so hard to be recognized inside the ANC as equals. And now I'm thinking, we're imagining the new South Africa and putting the gender issue firmly on the agenda. This was now in 1988, 1989.
But when you get somebody like Peter Tatchell saying to you, well, what about gay rights? I mean, did that give you pause for thought? Did you perhaps tweak what you were saying to take account of those kind of interventions?
We'd had a meeting with South African writers, mainly Afrikaans, at Victoria Falls in independent Zimbabwe. And a number of the writers were either gay men or lesbian women, very wonderful writers. And they put that question, and Thabo Mbeki said the position of the ANC is no interference with the consensual behavior of people because of their sexual orientation.
So it was already within your framework?
So he'd already given a statement. I was told afterwards that he actually didn't have a mandate to say that, but he said that. And then sometimes someone takes the initiative, and it's clearly right. It clearly fits in with everything we were fighting for, the right of people to be who they were. So now I could give an unequivocal position. I remember actually, speaking about that, being handed a long, do you remember those telexes? Went on and on, very difficult to read, you'd tear strips off the side, and this was pages long by somebody in Umkhonto-Weesies, where the arm wing of the ANC, saying that I'm gay, I'm fighting for freedom in South Africa, I'm willing to give my life for freedom in South Africa, will I be free in a new democratic South Africa? But it took about 6 pages with very heavy analysis to come to that, and the comrade who handed it to me was like shaking his head. It was too much for him. And it wasn't too much for me. I felt moved. I don't know who that person was. I felt deeply moved and proud to belong to an organization and a movement where people could express themselves in that way, that very kind of meaningful way. So it wasn't difficult for me.
Did you find that you could use the library here to refer to particular things? Did you use any of the other facilities here? So it was...
I could have, but I didn't.
So it was just blue sky thinking, really?
Yes, well, it was the tutored heart, if you like, and sensibility. And it was converting something that existed, the vision of a non-racial united South Africa. That was our demand. And we were living it out in practice, sharing danger, educating our own people, learning from each other. It wasn't just a notion. It was expressed very much in action. And we knew that's the only way the country could hold together. So how do you transfer that into the future of religion, freedom of expression, future of the whites, future of Roman Dutch law, judges and gender? Later on, I started working more on property and economic relations. And what's fascinating is now the stuff I was saying in 91, 92 is becoming very relevant in South Africa about land and about corruption. And one of the themes I came up with then was that constitutions are built on the tension between perfectibility and corruptibility. Now, the only book I've seen that in is my own book, which I forgot about. But now that corruption is such a big issue in South Africa, somebody quoted me as saying, you know, when we get our freedom in South Africa, the forces of corruption will be there, but it won't be gold beds like maybe elsewhere on the continent. Being a more developed country, our corruption will be more developed. And somebody wrote an article in the Law Journal recently, he quoted Albie Sachs as saying that. And I was saying that as a result of my thinking in my sojourn here, or at the ICS in London, but based on living in Africa, living in Mozambique, visiting Harare, seeing Tanzania, contrasting with Kenya, all other countries in the Commonwealth, but with different socio-political systems, different problems, one-party rule, military rule. The Commonwealth was very diverse and often not in a... And
of course still is.
Wonderful sense, yeah.
Quite. But you mentioned corruption. I mean, one of the problems, of course, is that, yes, the Constitution has had elements which have worked incredibly well. We, after all, have now a quarter of a century of experience. But it, at the same time, has allowed the, shall we say, the powerful to postpone the moment of justice for year after year after year. And does that not give you pause for thought that there was an element of the Constitution which somehow failed to force the issue to be brought to resolution?
No. No. Just the contrary. People say when you made the Constitution, you imagined it would always be Mandela or someone like Mandela in government. No. And it was just the opposite.
I'm sure.
And I quoted a Ghanaian writer who was picked up by a Zimbabwean writer, "The beautiful people are not yet born." So getting the vote, getting freedom in South Africa, the beautiful people, it's us with our frailties and temptations and ambitions. So I'm already putting that on the agenda. And what gives me pleasure now, just me, Albie, not Comrade Albie, not Professor Albie, not Judge Albie, the Albie deep inside Albie, is that we put into the Constitution the very mechanisms that are now exposing the corruption and abuses of power. A strong constitutional court, the strong emphasis on independent institutions, the judges...
Like the public protector.
Well, the public protector and the Independent Electoral Commission. We can have our 6th general elections. At that stage, in 1988, 89, the whites were saying, one man, one vote, once. And now we're heading for the 6th general elections, and they are as free and fair as you can get anywhere in the world.
But aren't you concerned that somebody like Justice Slope, against whom the most awful allegation was made that he tried to influence the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically said we must investigate this, yet years go by and it's never been done?
Okay, I've got to qualify that a little bit. I was on the Constitutional Court. I think his behavior was improper, but it wasn't as egregious as you're mentioning. It was like dropping a hint, which our standards are so high.
And rightly so.
And then the rule of law is applied, and the 2 judges to whom he made the statements themselves haven't pulled back, but they don't want proceedings against him. He's calmed down, he's quietened. We've got other big problems in the country. And sometimes you pay a price for having the rule of law, but it's a price worth paying.
Now that you've lived in a free South Africa within the Commonwealth again, how do you think that the Institute of Commonwealth Studies should really develop? And you knew it in the bad old days, you see it now in a much better way. How can the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, do you think, develop and serve not just South African interests, but everyone's interest in the Commonwealth?
Now I have to have that moment of reflection, not look up anything in libraries and books and so on. I think all the institutions that I've been connected with have faced a similar dilemma. You want continuity, you want to build on all your past experience, and you want disruption to be relevant and to open up. And it's getting that balance right. Too much disruption, everything can kind of collapse and become nasty, and then you seal it all up afterwards and you go back to very conservative positions. I remember Amnesty International had to deal with not just people of conscience sitting in their studies, the police are coming to torture, and they had to deal with capital punishment, then they had to deal with gender questions, then with the environment. I would say something similar would apply to the Commonwealth. The changing nature, we used to use the term balance of forces quite a lot now. I remember reading when I got here in '66, Claude Coburn, Private Eye, the fundamental rule of British journalism is don't kick a man until he's down. And I'm here now in Brexit, and people here are down, you know, they're down. There's no sense of providing any kind of leadership to the world, to the Commonwealth. And maybe that's not a bad thing.
And do you think the Institute of Commonwealth Studies could have a role in analysing and working on that?
And also picking up a new mystique, if you like, that's not based on the relics of the old imperial hegemonic point of departure. London is an amazing place. You know, for me, I was meeting exiles from Latin America and from Sri Lanka and from all over the place. And it's marvelous that can happen. It's marvelous it can happen at this university and at the ICS. So it will never lose that significant position. And there was something with the London Olympics that captivated the world. It was really a marvelous, the total opposite of what I hear some people wanting when what they see in Brexit. You know, it was the total opposite. It was really opening arms. It was vulnerability. It was joy in being connected with the world outside. And I think if that spirit can somehow seep into the much more formalistic, institutionalized, planned for, programmed work of the ICS, so not losing that, but benefiting from that, it can even help be a little bit ahead of what, I think the ICS should always be a little bit ahead of what the Commonwealth itself is doing. And it's a big, huge, lumbering kind of organization, and it must be so by its very nature. If it was streamlined and together, it wouldn't be as diverse as it is. I think it must always also be a meeting place for sharp intellects from all over the Commonwealth and from different registers, different ranges within the Commonwealth. It must be fun. The people mustn't get too dour, mustn't be too heavy. That's another combination that's not easy. It's between deep seriousness and genuine deep fun. And somehow that blend, I think, is vital for anybody who wants humanity to move forward in any way. Well, those are just a few vague thoughts that pop into my head.
Albie Sachs, thank you very much.